Hello, good morning, and happy Thursday, everyone. My name is Marley Gillies, and I am the Student Union Vice President External here at the University of Calgary. So if you've listened in at this time before, you've heard my voice talking all about the work that I'm doing, either at the municipal level, the provincial level, or the federal level, or even here at the University of Calgary, and lots has been happening. This week, I want to do something a little bit different. I have a guest in with me. She is a Ward 7 candidate. I have Erin Waite in with me. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could be here. If you don't know, the reason we are interviewing Ward 7 candidates is because the University of Calgary and sort of the surrounding area is all in Ward 7. So if you're a student or you know a student that's living on residence or anywhere near the university, there's a good chance that you're in Ward 7. So when you go to vote on election day, you will see the Ward 7 candidates there on the ballot for you. So some of the communities in Ward 7 is the Banff Trail area, Capitol Hill, Chinatown, Crescent Heights, the downtown core, downtown East Village, Eau Claire. It's a really packed place, Erin.
It really is.
Have you lived here for most of your life? Or
30 plus years, raised 3 kids here. And so, yeah, it's very much home for me.
That's awesome. Really great to hear. And tell us a little bit about yourself before you were a Ward 7 candidate.
Yeah, this is really a third career change for me. The first 2 careers, the first one was in corporate communications.
Okay.
I had the privilege of learning about business and finance with my English degree background. So I didn't have the academic background for it, but was taught by great business people in downtown Calgary. Loved that career until I hit a point where I needed to make more of a difference and have more purpose. And so I switched to nonprofit and ran an agency that provides disability services for the past 10 years.
Okay.
And so, I a ton of learning about where the barriers are in our systems, about lived experience and listening to people. And, if you want to support and help people, it's listening to them and their experience and not try to jump in and fix, which would be my natural tendency. So that was amazing learning just every single day. And so I feel that those 2 skill bases are good to take to City Hall and will help City Council. As well, my hobbies have always been in the arts, and so I've been on boards of directors for DJD and very involved in the Calgary Film Festival for years.
That's awesome.
Years.
Yeah.
And so that experience gave me a great background in governance and policy.
Definitely.
And so I feel like that's a mix that is needed at council.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and a great background. Lots that you've done. That's very exciting. Was there any sort of, pinpoint a moment where you decided to run for city council?
Yeah, it was kind of a slow boil in terms of getting more and more involved in how decisions are made for our city and where our city's going. I've kind of been an anti-nostalgia person for the last few years. Maybe it's people my age that are so stuck in thinking about the 70s and 80s, and it's like, just stop. Let's move forward. It's time to help this city move forward. We've got some great bones and need to just go forward and stop looking backward. And I feel like that energy's there in the city.
Yeah.
We were fighting it for a while, and there were groups of people fighting it, and I feel like that's changed. I've also raised 3 kids who've left Calgary. And so 2 of the 3 kids don't have driver's licenses and probably never will. So I'm thinking, what's the city that they would choose to make their home? And that's the city I want Calgary to be.
Yeah, no, fair enough for sure. And I feel like Ward 7 is such a good place to do that. It's packed here. And one of the things as a student leader that I'm looking at is there's a lot of post-secondary institutions in Ward 7. We've got the U of C, we've got the SAIT campus, AU Arts, and Bow Valley. So there's lots of students, there's lots of young people. It's a place that people come to learn. And, so whether that's transit or opportunities or whatever it is, Ward 7 is kind of the grounds that students and others might be wanting to see that come from.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, you've got lots of seniors living in the area. So can you do intergenerational things that work for all groups?
Yeah.
My idea is that the more mixed a community is, the more mixed a population, the less it's all people that look like me and just a whole bunch of different people. It's not just a value or a preference. I think that's a healthier community. I think,
Absolutely.
we've learned the pitfalls of a single industry city. And so when it has a downturn, the entire city feels it. Well, I feel the same in a community. When you have a whole mix of people, everybody's got different things going on at different stages of their life. And I think the mix is actually part of the strength.
Yeah.
And then you get those groups to interrelate, and then you've got something really special.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's everything you talk about, and I'm so excited to get into it a little bit more. One of the first topics I wanted to ask you about, though, and the most pressing thing for us as student leaders and for students and just for the post-secondary community in general is the Vote Anywhere advanced voting stations. So as I'm sure you heard, Elections Calgary has chosen not to have the Vote Anywhere stations, which is a step backwards from the 2017 election. And we saw students and the campus community use these polling stations to cast their vote. So not having them is so concerning. It's a confusing election. There's a lot going on. So we want to make sure students feel empowered to go and vote. So this is something that through the Calgary Student Alliance, we've raised and made sure that people are aware of this issue. As a candidate, where do you stand on the issue, and what do you think we can do going forward to make sure that students still go and vote?
It's frustrating to have a step backwards like that. And we're going to have a complicated ballot this time.
Absolutely, yeah.
With lots more on it. So
Yes.
I worry people will get discouraged, or they get confused and they think voting for mayor is more important than any other position. And that isn't true in terms of how our council is structured.
Yeah.
So even last election, there was a disproportionate vote for mayor, but then people voted mayor and walked out of the polling booth. So that's not a good thing. And that might happen if we have longer lineups. We also won't have the voters list, and so it'll take longer to actually check in. So the more you can do advance voting, the more in advance you could vote anywhere. You just get people in and through. You encourage voting. I mean, how you could ever set it up so that there's any discouragement for voting is just such a disappointment.
Yeah. So as a candidate, what can be done? How can you speak out on this issue and make sure Elections Calgary knows that this is not a decision that we stand by and we want it to be changed in time for the October date?
Yeah, unfortunately, they have a huge lead time in their preparation, which is really unfortunate. So when they make these decisions, it will take a lot of pressure to be able to change it because they run into a logistical issue to be able to reverse those decisions. So I think we also need to advocate, even if that decision isn't reversed, we need to continue to advocate to ensure voting processes are as simple forevermore.
I agree. And how, as a candidate, do you think you can do that?
Part of it's, we're all of the candidates, and there's way more of them, right? There's more races.
Yes,
going on,
it's
more
busy.
And I think every candidate can lend their voice to it and can educate at the doors in terms, just add a little bit of civics 101 to the conversation at the doors. So get over promoting themselves so much and actually promote the idea of democracy and voting and the importance of participating.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely what their job is to do, is to administer this election and make sure that as many people can actually go and vote. And I know Elections Calgary is doing lots of great things, but it's facilitating the people that were already planning on voting. And as a student leader, I'm looking at the students where this is their first election that they could vote in, and they're going to be handed 7 ballots, and it's going to be a very daunting experience. So as a student leader, we're continuing to advocate. The Calgary Student Alliance just put out a petition yesterday for students to, first of all, know that this is happening and that they should care. And so we're seeing a growing number of students and also faculty take up this issue. And I think one of the things that students and people in the area that would go to vote would look at a candidate that is, advocating for this.
Right.
And that would really stand out for them to know that not only the people who are already elected, like the Drew Farrells of the group that are speaking out on this, but that the candidates are too, so that it's not just, the ones that are already elected, but the ones that are going to be elected, and sort of this whole movement pushing Elections Calgary to really do the right thing.
Absolutely, and I lend my voice to that. And I also have a very solid track record in advocacy and taking on tough positions and sometimes lonely positions. I'm not afraid to do that.
That's really good to hear. It's something that we want to raise awareness for, and glad to hear that you're on board, because it's not something that we want to just die off and just quiet down. We want to make more noise about it as we lead up to October, because it's coming up really quick.
Yeah, for sure it is.
Yeah, and so students are going to come to campus in September, and we want this to be a part of the campus conversation, really. So as a candidate, I think that's something that students specifically will be looking for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So I guess thanks for your insight on that. It's such a huge, important issue for students right now, and it might seem like I'm talking nonstop about it, but I really do care. So it's the hill we're choosing to die on.
Absolutely. I'm glad you are. Participation's
So one of the other really important things for students, of course, is transit and the UPass program or otherwise, but of course the Green Line most prominently, I guess. And, I had a chance to check out your website to see that, you're in support of the Green Line. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and tell us, your specific position on the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom line is we made that decision in 1981 when we started a C-train system. There's no point having a system that doesn't actually connect with a whole network through the city. Yeah. So once you start, you have to keep going. The Green Line is a big, expensive project. That's a bit scary. But if we wait, it just gets more expensive. So let's get after it, get it done. It's really unfortunate that it's even been compromised at all and is less of a line in its first stage. So I'm absolutely on side. The sooner we get it done, the better. It's still a ways off, and there's lots of smaller things within transit we can do too. I love the idea of a hop-on, hop-off bus that does all the neighborhoods that surround downtown as a little connector, because if you're in Kensington or the Hillhurst or Kensington area and you want to go to Inglewood, it's very close and yet shockingly awkward to get there. It's a not that great a distance, but not all that convenient. So if you want to encourage people to use transit and to walk and bike more, then a little hop-on, hop-off bus that's often in large cities as a tourism attribute would be really nice to have. And so what are the smaller connector things we can do in the meantime? Specifically for students, I absolutely agree with a flexible pass that's inexpensive. It's really a shame through the pandemic they didn't extend the youth price structure to students. That should have been done. But then also as we, in September, I'm hoping service is full as well, because students need the campus all day and all evening. And so it can't be geared just to 9 to 5 or compromise. We need a really fulsome transit service to support our post-secondary throughout the ward.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really key points that exactly what students are looking for. I think there's sort of this perception that students just use transit to get to campus and back, but, they're using it to get to their jobs, to get to the grocery store, to go out with their friends. So it's something that, we're looking for to be active, participate in the city, and I think that's so key. And something as student leaders with the Calgary Student Alliance we've advocated for is consultation with Calgary Transit directly. It seems sort of ridiculous to me to have a program that's for students but never talk to students about it. So this past year was actually the first time us as student leaders got to sit down with Calgary Transit. So I think having students be a part of the conversation and be at the table where those decisions are being made, especially when they're about them, is really key. So that's something that we're looking for, and the things that you talk about really fall in line with that.
I really see things, and I've been in big systems before. That's my work experience.
Okay.
It's that thread that pulls through.
Yeah.
We're talking about wanting young people to stay in our city, and then we're not offering good transit.
Yeah.
We've got to connect these things. That thread has to pull through. And on council, we have to advocate for a solid post-secondary and varied program. So it's just painful to watch any cuts at university. Those messages aren't matching up. And so I think as counselors, we have to draw that through line to ensure what we're talking about as important and the values, that all our programs and services support those very things we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and speaking of that line, I really appreciate having the chance to sit down with you, because as a University of Calgary student, but as, the Vice President External with the Students' Union, my relationship with, the Ward 7 candidate has been so valuable in this position. It's been my first line of contact whenever there's an issue, even if it's a provincial issue. Having that, municipal perspective, or being able to talk to the person that is representing us on city council, is so valuable. And I guess, not necessarily an explicit question, but what's your relationship like, with students or with student leaders, and how, if you get this position, does our relationship mean in terms of your representation on council?
Well, it would be silly to not take that position when you think of how many people that involves, right? This is its own community in itself.
It's
really,
huge.
It's an own city within a city, and so absolutely crucial to stay engaged, listen to people. We're hearing a lot about listening, but then it's how you're. I see the role really on two levels. I'm talking to individuals on the ground, and you have the expertise of what's going on campus and how campus fits in the city and what's working and not.
Right.
You'll know that better than I ever will, even if I'm popping in and visiting once in a while. And same with everyone in each of their neighborhoods. They'll know their immediate issues so much because they're there 24 hours a day, and I have to listen to that. Then when I get to council, you're making decisions as a whole city. Yeah. And you're bridging to other levels of government often on many issues. And so it's those multi-levels that happen all at the same time. You can't afford to think about one and not the other. And you see that mistake among politicians. And so it's complex, and it's holding that complexity and synthesizing all of that together. That is the role. And that's why I like the fact that I've got those different careers and experiences that I'm synthesizing. Yeah. I feel like that's analogous to what this role is, and that it'll support this role. I've thought long and hard about, can I do that well? And I feel I can work on those different levels and listen to individuals, like the student population, well, and then bring that forward and ensure values are supported with programs that match.
That's good to hear, for sure. And, if elected, you'll be representing a lot of institutions and a lot of students. So I guess what's sort of your commitment going forward as a city councillor to make sure you're always in tune with that perspective?
It is that listening. It is the fact that I've lived here 30 years. It is that, in my family, among my kids, and we had that open door where I shouldn't actually say that, should I, publicly, that we didn't lock our doors so that students could come hang out if they had because we were handy to the school. And so it's keeping those networks of people in your life. I love the relationship that I learned through the disability community, and that I have that connection. A whole population and group of people that I didn't know before I worked in the field. And so I'll learn, I hope to continue talking and hearing that lived experience to bring that forward. So it's through that all those careers and personal relationships that you want to pull forward and learn from. And it's tricky because you pick a topic and there's some people on one side and some on the other, so it's not like you're getting to consensus every time. That's not the job either. It's pulling all that input and then figuring out what makes the most sense, what you can prioritize. There's a lot to it. You're not pleasing everybody, and you have to understand that as well.
And it's interesting. It's kind of a theme that's come up in these interviews, is where do you draw that line, and how do you make sure you're representing who you can to the best of your ability. And Ward 7 is just so dense and so different. Right. So it's a difficult task to do. So I admire you for taking it on and to committing to, listening. And I think that's just so key for us as student leaders too, is just to have that person to go to.
I thought long and hard because I wanted to ensure I had something to truly add, and that I would do something responsibly and authentically, and I had to think long and hard that I really had the energy to put into it and carry that out properly. And so I did that thinking before I even stepped in.
And I can tell it's all been thought out, and I'd love to know more, because I was looking on your website and there was a lot about, investment in Ward 7 and making sure that, we're focusing on that development in such a really crucial area in the city. So what specifically do you plan on doing, or do you think you can do to keep investment in Ward 7 and to make sure that inner city area stays really vibrant?
One of the things that's a bit of a hot button issue is talking about development. And what I worry about in established neighborhoods is pricing out young families and people coming out of university and being able to start up and stay inner city and near downtown where they likely want to live. And so I'd love to add a mechanism in any multi-home development where a portion is pegged below market price, so that you keep some affordability and, again, that mix of people that are able to live in the wards. So that's something to really watch with our state, that gentrification issue. I want a mix so that that as broad a range of people can afford to live and stay and make Ward 7 their home. So that's a big one for me.
Okay, yeah.
That's a real challenge, and we're quickly losing that unless we jump in and deal with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think students have a really unique place in that because, you know, they're looking for unique housing, different needs, students with families or students that are on their own and just want temporary affordable housing. So that Ward 7 is such a really important place for that, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's great to hear, you know, about your plans. Anything more specific that you wanted to add in terms of what people in Ward 7 might be able to look forward to or anticipate in terms of how their areas, their communities, or even just at a broader sense that Ward 7 can develop and improve?
Yeah, there's lots. I think there's some issues around community consultation. I think that needs refinement. People aren't feeling listened to. But there's lots of good steps there. We just need to improve that. It's not a quantity of consultation. It's a quality of consultation. So there's some fixing there. And I'm hearing that in all parts of the ward. I also think we're going to head into a period here, COVID recovery and economic recovery, where budgets will be tight at all three levels of government.
For sure.
So what are the small, high-impact projects we can do that connect our communities? I look at the downtown strategy, which is an awesome start, but it was really developed before COVID, and coming out of COVID, some of the patterns might be different. So I think there's ways we can take that a lot further, and luckily there's a whole bunch of people really keen about that, so I don't think that'll even be a tough fight, but I'm really keen to jump into that. I'd love to work with the arts, like the festivals and the arts communities. We've already got the Glenbow and Arts Commons with major investments. How do we then complement those big projects with those smaller, on-the-ground, active projects that make the downtown interesting throughout, and not just in the east half of downtown, but through to the west as well. And so I think it's going to be those smart, small projects that punch above their weight for the next number of years while we're in a bit of a transition and recovery mode. And I think that's where we can make a difference and just be careful and smart with investment and do interesting things that make everyone, you know, people who live in Ward 7 love Ward 7, and so we'll build on that and just keep that up.
No, for sure. And I think you touched on I think the smart projects or smart small projects or something like that where, you know, they're really beneficial. And I think one of the ones that might fall into that category that students are looking for is the McMahon Stadium and Foothill Athletics Park area. That's something that, you know, is used so much by students, University of Calgary or otherwise. So anything in that category that you think, you know, could be looked forward to in terms of getting us off the ground in terms of these small, smart projects?
Yeah, and that would be a bit of a major project, but some of the things on the list for that project are things that were cited, you know, they were listed as the top priority for the city before the Olympics in '88. That's how long we've been waiting for some of those things. So absolutely top priority, but then it's making sure it goes well in terms of being built well and works well with neighboring communities. Yeah. And so some of that is where the community consultation has to be done well, because you don't want people fighting it because it'll slow it down. So how do you work well with people and ensure it's a project that fits and then accomplishes its prime goal of adding those facilities that we need?
Yeah, no, I think that's all very exciting, and I know students will be happy to hear that, and others who live in Ward 7 too that might be listening and will be voting in this area. It's a big one.
It's a big one, and lots goes on in this ward, but that's exciting because it's interesting. I always joke that I've lived here long enough that Kensington was all futon shops. When I first moved here, it's probably coming back. It'll probably be futon shops again. They'll get a resurgence. So change is good. It excites me.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Change can be hard, and sometimes the first reaction is not to like something that's changing. Right. And then a year later you realize it feels like it's always been there. So change is hard on people, and you have to have that leadership to take people along, listen to people through change, and really ensure change is working and working for the big voices and the noisy voices as well as the quiet voices. And so that's, I think, the challenge of the role.
Fair enough, yeah. And I think you might have answered my last question here, but one of the questions I always ask the mayoral candidates, because, you know, it's like a 22 candidate race, I think last I counted. But, you know, with such a busy ballot, what makes you stand out as a candidate?
I really think it's the two things of the 30 plus years of living in the ward. So I know the ward that well, and it really has been my home that long and raising my kids there. So I know it intimately. And the second thing is the combination of expertise from corporate to social services. And so I think it gives me both a financial sensibility, but also I know where the barriers are and how our city doesn't work for lots of people. And so between those things, I think I have something that offers City Council way to work even better and get more done.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that with us today. I know the students listening, or if they know a student listening, that they'll be eager to vote in Ward 7, make their voice heard, and have a candidate that, is looking out for the best interests of students and the post-secondary community. And that's really key. So thank you for sharing all of your insight with me today, this morning. But anything you wanted to part with?
No, thank you. I just would emphasize that importance of voting, and
Absolutely.
I definitely will be speaking out on that issue. And voting for councillor, not just mayor. The councillor has a vote on council issues, as does the mayor, a single vote. And so who all those councillors are, whether you live in Ward 7 or any other ward, paying attention to who our councillors end up being along with the mayor is very important. So it's a critical time for the city, and I hope we get a nice, good working group that works well together and helps move our city through this really critical time.
I very much agree. So thank you so much, Erin, again, for being on the show this morning. Thank you so much again, Erin, for being here. And
thank you.
We'll talk soon.